Okay, here we go. Silent ego, the soul of the entrepreneur. However, today we have Jeremy Dalton, who's an intrapreneur, who is head of virtual reality and augmented reality. And I've got to say is a specialist on the subject. So we're in for an interesting journey over the next 45 minutes. He's currently at PwC and has been there for best part of a decade. He is seen on an international stage as the guy that kind of knows it all around virtual reality and augmented reality. So I'm privileged, and it's a first for me. So I think our audience, our viewers and listeners over the next number of weeks as we distribute this, are going to be fascinated with the future, because I've also heard that our guest, Jeremy Dalton, can actually see the future. However, we're going to put that to the test today. Jeremy, welcome. It's a pleasure and a privilege. And standard question, but the right one. Where did it all begin?
So, Paul, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. And believe me, the pleasure and privilege is all mine. So in terms of your question, where did it all begin? You can go back quite a long way, but why don't we start with university, actually? Because I think some people might recognize some relations here or some connections, might be able to relate to it a little bit. So I studied mathematics at university, and the reason being that I was good at it at high school, and it was nothing more than that. I was expected to study something sciencey that gave me a potential future. I really hadn't a clue about the business world. I didn't know what jobs were out there. I had no idea about those jobs. So there I was. I did mathematics at university because it seemed like a good idea. Equally, my decision to join PwC was based initially on equally spurious grounds, some might argue, in that it seemed like a good company. You know, they visited the campus, they sold themselves well, seemed like a decent bunch of people with operations all over the world doing great things for businesses. So I thought, okay, this might be something that I could join and learn a few things. And so I did. I joined PwC back in 2011. And originally, and very surprisingly, some might think, I started off doing auditing. I then moved over to business recovery services, dealt with a number of projects from Lehman Brothers shutting down here in the UK through to the administration of various high store and other groups. And then found myself in a situation where I had enough exploring at that point. And I really wanted to pursue something that was special to me, that I felt excited about, that made me really passionate about what I was doing. So I tried to. I had always been a big proponent of technology. Emerging technology was a super exciting area for me. And I was actually considering leaving PwC at the time and joining the startup world. And this is kind of where the battle begins in my head between the startup world and the world of the large corporations. In the end, though, I actually found a division that was very much in a fledgling state in the firm at the time, and it was called Digital and Emerging Technologies, and it sounded right up my alley. So I met a few people that were involved in the heading of that group. I started doing some work for them on the side, you know, before my day job, after the day job, and through luck, I managed to replace someone who left that group, and so I joined this Digital and Emerging Technologies team. I got to be involved in a lot of different exciting work with clients around innovative technology. So everything from artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, blockchain, virtual reality, and so on. But the problem was, all of these technologies, as you can imagine, are advancing at such a rapid pace that it is really difficult to keep on top of them. So I said to myself, if I'm really going to add value in this space of emerging technologies, I've got to focus on one specific area and I've got to go all in on it. And this is where the story of virtual reality and augmented reality begins, because I chose that area.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, the classic sort of consulting background and how it's kind of led you and shaped you to the opportunity that you're representing right now in that big corporate structure, if you don't mind me saying. And you even right now, I can pick up you're speaking like an entrepreneur, like an innovator, like a thought leader. But often, if you don't mind me saying this, you don't see that in the big corporation. And I noticed, obviously, I know you wrote a book that was released this year, the reality check, which is quite interesting. So what I'm keen to explore is, how does this all happen? So you've got this big company called PwC. You go through the classic, if you don't mind me saying, auditing, consulting background. All of a sudden, you then, the line of travel is following your heart. And if you don't mind me saying this, we often meet a lot of people who are looking to come out that environment to then go and join an innovator. But it sounds like you've got the best of all worlds, including the virtual one. So, how does that all come together? It's great. This entrepreneur in this big branded business. So you must be, having some serious fun in there.
I'm super excited about it, and you're absolutely right. I do like to think of it as the best of both worlds, because on one hand you get the support and the stability of being in a large corporation, but on the other hand you also get the excitement of building something from scratch, and you kind of have challenges actually that sit in between both of those, where you effectively have a market where you're constrained by the rules and the governance procedures around that market. So I'm thinking about the internal processes that we all have to adhere to in large organizations. And that represents a really interesting challenge as well that you don't get to see a lot of in the startup landscape. And it's just an amazing combination of the two worlds that I've just had a really great time navigating over the last few years, for sure.
That's interesting. So, coming back to our listeners, our viewers, the subject of AI, virtual and augmented reality. What's the distinctions, and how does that play, to the layman? We talk about it a lot. I see it. Obviously, I'm heavily involved with the technology industry and have been for 30 years. So I kind of get it. But a lot of people are wrestling with it right now. You're very right to identify the pace of change is moving at such a pace. I mean, I'm now feeling that every week is like a month. Every month is like a quarter in conventional business terms, So a year is almost like, in change terms, it's almost like 4 years in one. And getting quicker. And AI is being talked about now on a daily basis. VR's coming in so many different guises, augmented. What's the distinction between VR, AR? How does that all define itself in relation to the business world as an example of the next 10 years? What does that all mean to us?
Sure. So there are many terms out there relating to all of these technologies. There's virtual reality, augmented virtuality, mixed reality, all the realities. But really, the best way of summarizing this whole situation is that on one hand, you've got virtual reality, and this is about the ability to immerse yourself in a completely different environment, set of circumstances, and so on. And the other side of the technology is augmented reality. And augmented reality is about information. It's about providing you with the best information to be able to perform a task in the real world, to navigate through that world, or give you information that ultimately helps you to do what you want to do. And that's the best way of thinking about that distinction. In terms of how these technologies actually impact the working world and business, they are actually quite incredible in the sense that they offer businesses the ability to create new revenue streams. They offer businesses the ability to reduce costs, to increase efficiencies, and if you think about it from a function perspective within the business, you can even dig it down dig out the benefits at that level as well. So whether you're looking at a learning and development team, virtual reality has the ability to improve knowledge retention, improve focus amongst learners. When you're talking about operations, this technology has the ability to make remote assistance more accurate, reduce errors in that operation. You have the ability to work together more effectively, even though you may be in completely different countries around the world. From a health and safety perspective, you can reduce accidents by visualizing the subterranean landscape of utilities to avoid utility strikes, when you hit a gas pipe during some construction work, for example. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many examples out there relating to so many different industries and functions of how this technology can help us in business. And that was actually the point of writing Reality Check. It was to try and get the point across that this is virtual reality and augmented reality may be thought of as a video gaming technology, a fun technology, a technology for entertainment, but it is very much a technology for business.
Okay, so given that we're sort of talking it from a business perspective, and is obviously as a specialist and a thought leader, and this is sort of, this has got your kind of unconditional commitment for the future. How is it going to impact us in the home, as an example? So from a business point of view, I think that we could come on to talk about how it possibly is going to support doing business in a different way, replacing some skill sets maybe. That could be sort of seen as a potential threat. But equally, in the home, how's it going to, find its way to us? Because, to be candid, we're all working from home. It's now, and there's now the new world is saying, home is where the heart is. So all this technology is going to end up in our front rooms somewhere along the line.
Absolutely. The consumer world is as exciting as the business world, to be honest. I don't get to talk about it a lot because I'm mostly talking to businesses.
Right.
But absolutely, you can, if you think about what the future might look like once a critical mass of us have virtual reality headsets in the home, as I do. I've got shelves and shelves of them behind me. This technology has the ability to, first of all, and most obviously, act as a great entertainment device, a more immersive entertainment medium that we've never experienced before.
Right.
If you look at the statistics behind what people want from their entertainment media, the results are always the same. They want a bigger screen, they want a better sound, they want higher resolution, hence why we've gone, from VHS tapes to standard definition to high definition to full HD to 4K. Now we're talking about 8K. People are getting, the size of their television screens are increasing. All of this would seem to any reasonable person to be a desire to really be embedded in that material, that content that you're engaging with. I want to be immersed in it completely. And the end result of immersion is virtual reality. It's where you put on a headset and the entire world around you, not just the little rectangular screen that's mounted on your wall, is your digital content environment that you can view in such an incredibly engaging way that you've never been able to do before.
Goodness gracious, that's absolutely amazing. So just looking at the sort of, dare I say it, the psychological impact this is going to have in the way we live our lives. I mean, could you share some light on that? Because if you think about that sort of virtual world, that experience, the senses that it's triggering, psychologically, neurology, etc., we're rewiring with this, aren't we? It's a bit like you're saying, well, if you want to go to Barbados, put your headset on, you're there. I know that sounds right out there, but we're not far from it, are we?
No, not at all. In fact, the reason why virtual reality is so powerful is because it does reach into that lizard part of your brain and makes you feel like you are in that digital environment, even though you know logically that you are still in your bedroom, in your meeting room, in the office, in your living room, whatever it is. And the best way to try and bring that to life is there is an experience. It's a very famous one in the virtual reality industry. It's called Ritchie's plank experience. And as it sounds, you've got a plank of wood which is being extended over a massive skyscraper. And as an individual in the virtual reality headset, you take a lift to the very top of this skyscraper, you walk over to the edge, and then you have to walk across this plank very carefully, while, trying to avoid looking down and realizing that you are in fact, 100 stories high in the air. And to someone who has only ever, watched television or played games on a small screen in front of them, you can't really see why that is so special. But everybody that I've seen who has gone through that experience has had the same really nervous, almost sweat-inducing reaction to being there. And that's just a testament to the power of the technology. So to answer your question in summary, it 100% does impact the brain in a different way, but that impact itself is what gives the technology its power and what makes it valuable in the consumer world and in the business world.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously there's a lot of medicinal benefit to what you've just expressed there. So if I look at it from an application perspective with mental health as an example, and I'm not going to go down any wild rabbit holes today, but equally changing somebody's environment, which is what you're expressing there, and giving them for it be a virtual but a highly sensed experience, can have a significant impact on well-being. As an example.
The applications in healthcare are crazy. There are so many. What you're alluding to, one of those application areas specifically, is around the treatment of dementia patients, or the symptoms, I should say.
Wow.
In that, if exposure therapy is often used for those patients, where you try and ground them in a part of their history. So, for example, if they grew up in a 1950s Northern England neighborhood, then you might attempt to rebuild that neighborhood for them as it was back then in the 1950s, and hopefully end up with a positive result. Now, the problem, though, is that it's very difficult to do that in the real world because it involves construction.
That's right.
It involves a physical location which has to be managed and maintained and so on. So there are lots of obstacles to doing this. But if we translate that to software, which is effectively what we're doing every time we put on a virtual reality headset, we can give them that reality. We can give them that sense of walking physically in a 1950s neighborhood and get the impact that we're looking for that way. And that's only one example. Virtual reality is being used to treat PTSD in soldiers returning from war. It's being used to treat phobias. If you have a fear of spiders, of enclosed spaces, of heights, then you can manage that in virtual reality in association with a professional, of course, but in a controlled way that helps you to manage that fear. It's being used for pain management, and in fact has been shown in academic studies to be more powerful sometimes than even opioids in terms of managing pain.
Wow.
So you can imagine the ramification for the healthcare industry once that really ramps up and starts to be used in a significant mainstream way.
And how close are we for this to become a practical solution to these challenges? How far away are we from this becoming not necessarily mainstream, but it's in and it's happening?
So it's happening right now. And I can say that because I have first-hand experience in working with organizations and dealing with them and liaising with them to understand how they're using virtual reality and augmented reality. And they are using it to train their workforces on soft skills. Right. They're using it to train their engineers on how to perform tasks at height. They are using it to allow for a more cost-effective model of providing remote assistance capability to field workers from a central hub or distributed with senior engineers in different parts of the world. It's being used for operational purposes in the utilities industry. I mentioned this before. And it's being used also to work to bring teams together in a really effective way. In fact, right now we're working with 250 people worldwide, all in different parts of the world. Some are in China, some are in the US, some are in the UK, Dubai, Nigeria, Australia. But we need a way to bring them together, despite the fact that the current climate doesn't allow for that. We can't have people traveling all over the place during the pandemic and with lockdowns going on, but we can make them feel like they are together in the same environment. It's just that environment is not real. It is a digital environment. So to answer your question, it is here and now. It is just not well understood to be taken advantage of by all businesses yet. But that day will certainly come. And if you look at the progress that's been had over the last few years, there's no doubt that we'll see increased adoption year on year of this technology as we go forward.
Wow, so it's coming very, very quick. I mean, I've just thought, right now, if you're looking from a business proposition perspective, I can see the day where, I don't know, but just put the headset on and we can actually explain the objective and what the solution is going to look like once you've made the decision. So I can see that accelerating decision cycles in conventional business, particularly in construction and, town planning and things like that, to give people a good sense of that, because not everybody's got that visual sort of right brain sort of creation. And,
Exactly.
Often the decision makers, if you don't mind me saying, they've got an accountancy background and, they tend to sort of look at the numbers.
I take no offense to it.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? So that's sort of like visual expression, and that's sort of giving people a sense of the experience is a very key component to, doing better business. But I mean, that's fascinating around the medical impact. And, and like you quite rightly said, we're at the beginning of this journey in some respects. So, obviously stepping right out, obviously we're all talking, and I know that at one point you were involved with, the World Forum.
The World Economic Forum, yes,
correct.
Exactly.
And that's in the press on a daily basis right now about, the next decade, the Great Reset, all that, the likes. And we all know the pace of change technically that's coming, digital currencies, all of these things are backing up and ready to come to take us to the future, so to speak. So how do you see it, given that you're a specialist in this subject and there's lots of general overlaps technically in so many different areas? So you're kind of, in some respects, you're sitting at the heart of it. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, all this great Star Trek stuff that we all grew up with, us sort of old guys, if you don't mind me saying. And it's now going to transport us to the future. So what does the future look like from your perspective?
So the future, it's a world where we are learning not by only reading a textbook, by actually being immersed in those scenarios, by being on the moon during the Apollo 11 mission rather than watching it, on a TV screen as an outsider. It is a world where we are experiencing art in a far more engaging way by being part of that art piece rather than being a spectator of it. It is a world where we are more connected to people no matter where they are on this planet. Right. Because we can be in that same world as them, that same digital world. It is a world where we are being instructed by potentially augmented reality glasses, telling us where to go, what we're seeing, how to respond to things, any dangers in the distance that we haven't even seen with the human eye yet. Basically having the computer aid us behind the scenes, but using augmented reality as a visual layer to transmit and communicate that information to you, and from a virtual reality perspective, using this hardware and these devices as a gateway to an entirely new world.
So that brings me on to, education. So sort of, I've got two small children, and we're in that schooling sort of phase and curriculars, and right now the way the last 12 months has rolled out, we're starting to think, well, what was is no longer, what is the future? And our kids are gravitating to devices very, very quickly. But do you see that this, the headset, the educational environment is now going to be really driven by this medium, this technology? Do you see our children now being educated this way?
I see it as being a component of the education, but I think it's very important to stress that virtual reality shouldn't be the be-all, end-all of education initiatives. It is a tool at the end of the day, like most technologies are, to achieving an end goal, that is greater education in this case. And it is fantastic in a lot of situations when you're learning about history, or you're learning about something visual, or you need a more visual way of learning for a subject that is perhaps fairly textual. I'm thinking about mathematics, for example. There are a lot of components of mathematics that could very well be aided by using 3 dimensions all around you to try and bring those concepts to life. And virtual reality is fantastic in those cases. But we have to remember that education, when it comes to textbook learning, is very useful in a lot of situations. It allows us to reflect on the material. Some learners are more textual learners, and they shouldn't be penalized if we change everything to virtual reality, for example. So in summary, I see it as being a helper, and will certainly be a part of education in the mainstream, but will definitely not take over education.
Right, interesting. And just sort of moving it around, so I think that we generally feel it's a very exciting subject. It's becoming a true practical reality with numbers of mainstream applications. There's clearly going to be a huge entertainment value to it. You can see this. So knowing what you know, and being this domain expert and specialist, and it's fantastic, and the author of the book, The Reality Check. What's the darkness to this? Is there any darkness, Jeremy? Do you see any? Wow, this is going to have a real impact on humanity. And can I touch on the subject, sanity?
Absolutely. So there are concerns, to be honest, with this technology, as there are usually when a new technology is finding its place in society. And with virtual reality, if we can let's start in one area. There are worries that we will see some of the things we've seen in the mainstream world right now around addiction to some of our digital devices and our digital applications. But the question is, will that be amplified by the greater immersive nature of virtual reality? The fact that we're no longer consuming this content on a screen in front of us, but it is the entire environment around us. So there are concerns there. There are also concerns that are a bit more business related, that relate to the business world. And those are around data protection, privacy, cybersecurity. To bring those to life, it's important to think about what type of data could you potentially be worried about when you're wearing a virtual reality headset? That differs, very importantly, and this is the point, that differs from the type of data that could be collected when you're using a computing device, a laptop or a desktop or a tablet. And the interesting thing is, if you really dig into that, virtual reality not only tracks how you move your head, because you look around, you've got the headset on, you look around and you're looking around in this virtual environment. You also have the ability to use your hands in virtual reality as well. So when you need to pick up a virtual object, a virtual hard hat, and put it on, things like that. All of that data has to be collected to be able to create these applications, right? If all of that data is collected, then suddenly you have all of the data around how somebody how somebody picks up an object. Now that might sound a bit fairly disinteresting, let's say. But some studies have shown that the way you walk can determine who you are. So people can be identified from the way that they walk. Now, if you can identify someone from the way that they walk, can you identify someone by the way that they use their hands, by the way that they say hello, by the way that they pick up a cup of coffee, and so on? And if you can identify that individual by doing that, does that then become personally identifiable data that then becomes under the remit of GDPR? You also have the height of the individuals, because you know that their headset is at eye level.
Yes.
So, and if you've calibrated the floor correctly, then you have that individual's height with a simple mathematical calculation. So all of these things that are not on the surface from a data perspective could be slightly worrying if the data is not appropriately protected and safeguarded.
So lots of challenges there.
Absolutely. That's why we need to keep it front of mind.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I am genuinely very, very excited about this next chapter of our lives. I've just thought of an application straight away that I'm not a particularly good cook, but I do follow good instructions. So I've just now got my virtual headset on. I'm just thinking about this in the kitchen, and it's now guiding me through every single step of how to cook this or prepare this meal. I've just found an application there, so that's where I've gone.
And
with
the funny thing is, Paul, every time I talk to someone about this technology, they themselves, like you just did now, think about a new way to use it, whether in the consumer world or the business world. And I love that about the technology.
Yeah, no, so it must be incredibly exciting. Just before we move on to yourself, Jeremy, because I need to know how you kind of relax, because you've got to keep up with this pace of change consistently, and you've kind of. I mean, I know you're totally committed. It's very clear you're unconditionally committed to this. It comes across in spades. The energy is amazing, but just from a power perspective, just stepping slightly to one side, obviously, because this subject area does touch on 5G and satellite technologies and things. I mean, how are we going to operate? Because this is quite a powerful medium, isn't it? It's a big subject, all this data, all this virtual stuff. I mean, it's all out there in the ether. I mean, how are we going to be able to supply the power to make all this happen?
So you touched on a really important point, and it's related to convergence of these emerging technologies. So yes, I deal with virtual reality and augmented reality as a specialist, but I certainly understand that thinking about virtual reality and augmented reality narrowly, only VR and AR and nothing else, is you can certainly come up with applications for sure, but the real value you get is when you start thinking about how these technologies work with other technologies to add even more value. So the example you're talking about when you're bringing 5G into the equation,
yes,
5G is an important component of virtual reality's future because, one, it enables greater bandwidth, greater transmission of data over the air, and two, it decreases latency. Both of those are really important for VR because if you are sending data relating to an entirely virtual world that is surrounding you, that is a lot of data to be streaming over the air, and 5G can help with that. From a latency perspective, and this is a little bit more technical, but when you are moving your head in virtual reality, say you move it to the left to look at something to the left, the delay between when you move your head and when the digital world moves to align with where you want to look, if that delay is too large, it makes people feel sick. And anyone who's listening, if you recall trying virtual reality out in the early 90s, mid 90s, when the hype was huge and there was a lot of excitement about it, you may recall some quite unpleasant experiences potentially because we didn't have the processing power back then to be able to reduce that latency to such a low level. And that was part of the reason why virtual reality ended up in this hibernating state until this latest era, which started in 2012. But yeah, 5G is certainly going to help to manage the greater transmission of data, reduce that latency, and also deal with another challenge of virtual reality, which is making the headsets smaller, lighter, and more fashionable. If I'm honest, if it's going to go mainstream, it's just got to be more fashionable.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, I do a little bit of research. Apple is a good example with Apple Glass. The specs has been talked about for quite some time, and, kind of driverless cars and things like that. You could just see how this all impacts all of that. But, it just feels like it's imminent. It's all going to roll very, very quickly. And do you feel that's a reality? Do you think, we all talk about this great reset over the next sort of, and this is at the heart of it, all these technology advances and 5G that will spin to 6G and it'll just be growing and growing and growing. I mean, how, what is the darkness there? I mean, there's a lot of change. There's lots. I know we touched on do you, in your heart, feel this is a real practicality? Is this, or is there going to be, a bridge too far?
I think virtual reality and augmented reality certainly have challenges. And if I were to bucket those challenges into the main areas, there are challenges around cost, which is fairly self-explanatory. There are challenges around content, creating enough content for consumers to justify buying the equipment in the first place. There is a challenge around the experience. So this relates to what I was just talking about, having headsets that are smaller, lighter, more comfortable, more intuitive to use from a software perspective, all of that sort of stuff. And then finally, education, the ability of all of us individuals out there to understand the real value of the technology, mostly from having tried it firsthand, because that's really important. It's very visual. Those challenges are being mitigated, and they have been worked on really heavily over the last few years. And it's gotten to the point where there are consumer products in the market now which are really viable. You can go on Amazon, buy them for starting at £299, and they produce a really good experience, and that's incredible. But I'm not going to say that I believe this is going to be an imminent change, that we're going to see some amazing things in 2022 and it's just going to change everything from that point onwards. Realistically, I think what we're going to see with this technology is a slow creep. Right. In the sense that more and more people are going to use it. It clearly has value. It has value in business and it has value in the consumer world. So it's not going to die. It's going to creep up as more and more people start to adopt it. And as more and more people start to adopt it, they'll bring others with them as well. And eventually we'll get to a point where maybe 5 years from now or so, we will look around us and realize that everybody's using virtual reality headsets. Whereas, 10 years ago, it was a bit of a joke. I think that's what's going to happen ultimately.
I think we're at that classic sort of innovator pioneer phase. And then we'll hit the adoption. It becomes a fashion. And then before you know it, how did we live without it? The kind of like the classic.
If you're sorry, Paul, if you're speaking to analysts about it, people like Gartner have already removed virtual reality and augmented reality from their emerging technology hype cycle. And
really?
for those who don't know, Gartner's hype cycle is all about the pathways of emerging technologies and how mature they are. But emerging being the key word. And Gartner have removed both of them from there because they see it, from my perspective and from speaking to some of them, that these are already mainstream in a sense. I mean, and I can understand why they think that because they're on store shelves right now. You can go on Amazon and grab them. So how can we study this as an emerging technology if that's the case?
Yeah, interesting. So they're obviously having to justify those huge reports somewhere on the journey. But yeah, no, I've got it. No, 100%. So Jeremy, about yourself, I mean, that's great. I mean, I'm finding this very, very fascinating. And it's great to communicate with you. You've written the book. I mean, what's happening in how do you kind of relax? Let's talk about Jeremy a little bit here. You're in this big business. You're obviously talking to quite a number of companies as well, I dare say. You're sort of mindsets and your insights and things, you sit on quite a number of boards and panels, and it's an all-consuming situation that you're in here. And it's actually quite interesting as well because you're part of history. You're leading the future as a thought leader in this particular subject area. You're you're carving some level of history here somewhere along the line. And
so it's kind, Paul.
Yeah, but it is, isn't it? It's all, you've got to be, you're either all in or you're not. It's as simple as that. But what about yourself? I mean, privately, I mean, is this your world literally, or is it? Do you manage to get time to do kind of normal things, if you don't mind me saying that?
Yeah, no worries at all. I try to avoid the busman's holiday, where I spend my time, my leisure time inside a virtual reality headset as well as at work. But the interesting thing is, at work, I don't spend as much time in a headset as you might think, because for everyone out there, you know how it is. It doesn't really matter what industry you're in. You're dealing with different stakeholder groups. You're dealing with problems that are arising. You're dealing with your own teams. You're dealing with slide decks. You're dealing with business cases, spreadsheets, financial models, and so on. And to a large extent, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing at work as well. So being in my leisure time, it's not so bad, having fun in virtual reality. But in addition to that, I would also say that I make sure to carve out some time specifically in my diary to allow for that. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, I'm sort of over formalizing or over scheduling, but I think the idea is that if you follow a system where you use your calendar as your primary source of telling you what to do or what you need to do next, then it can be a useful tool for ensuring that you are able to buy yourself some time when you need it. And so I carve out that time, and I spend a lot of my leisure time actually playing video games with old friends on my computer. They haven't bought into virtual reality yet. I'm still working on them, but we play cooperative games together on the PC. And
just stepping ahead, with yourself from a line of travel. I mean, what's the future for you personally? I mean, obviously, pardon the language, but PwC is your playground right now. It comes across a little like that. I've got to say, you're probably one of the happiest people I've seen in the corporate environment for quite some time. Got to say that. But what's the future for yourself? I mean, where do you see yourself with this line of travel? Yeah,
there is a lot of scaling up to do in virtual reality for PwC. So I look after the virtual reality and augmented reality division within the UK, but there are equivalent divisions in the US, in the Middle East, Nigeria, and all sorts of places across the globe. There is a lot of opportunity out there because of what we were talking about. Most clients or most organizations haven't yet adopted this technology in a massive sort of scalable mainstream way. And if they haven't done that, then there is an opportunity to help them do that. So I certainly see there being a lot of work to do over the next few years in terms of bringing the global capabilities around XR, which is the umbrella term for augmented reality and virtual reality, together to try and help these organizations really drive these technologies into the business, but not just for the sake of it, but because it adds real business value there. So I see there being a lot of work ahead, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, no, it comes across. So just touching as we lead up to concluding our very high-paced but highly informative conversation today, I've got to say it's been fascinating, and I can't help but be thinking about applications around augmented reality right now. It's just got my line of thought going. I
did my job.
Yeah, you did, definitely, without question. I'm sold. The US and Silicon Valley right now, I mean, clearly you're connected some that, you definitely are. I mean, the pace of change out there right now is off the scale, isn't it? There's so much going on. So just anything that's sort of periphery to your world. What's spiking externally? What's spiking technically? What other areas are you sort of gleaning an interest in? With what's going on in the Valley right now, and I mean, from everything from blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and digital dollar, and all this stuff that's kicking out. I mean, what's the message to some of our viewers? As somebody has said that you're a futurist and you can see the future. What's the future for some of our listeners and viewers today? What's going on? Yeah.
I think it's important to start acknowledging the power of the digital world. So I'm going one level up from virtual reality. Virtual reality is a technology that allows you to immerse yourself in a digital world, but it is, and therefore it's a gateway, but you can access the digital world through a number of other different devices. Now, the technologies like the internet have really brought people together and enabled us to create value and collaborate more effectively. But we're now seeing layers being introduced into the digital environment, like, as you're saying, blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and most recently NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and it's absolutely incredible if you think about the impact that the digital world is having on the real world economy. So people are spending tens of millions of pounds on what is effectively a bunch of code that affords them no more value than to say that I am the owner of this product, as they would do with a physical painting on their wall. But the interesting thing is here, with a physical painting on your wall, nobody can take that away from you technically. In the virtual world, everyone can just take a copy of your digital painting with hardly any effort. Yet, despite that, there is this scarcity has been created in the sense that you are the original owner, and that has inherent value according to the market. Right. And you can apply that to video games as well. You know, you've got models now where video games are being given for free, with the expectation that players are going to pay, and not necessarily for functional progress in the game, but they're going to pay for what is nothing more than an aesthetic change, a hat on your character, a different material for your weapon, whatever it is. And I'm sure it boggles some people's minds as to why people would pay this money for that, but they are. They are paying millions and billions of pounds to access these digital enhancements. So I think this concept of the digital world is one that is only going to grow in the future and should really be respected and examined more.
So somewhere on this journey, do you see, our relationship with money changing? Because it's almost money. The world we know of money and capitalism as we knew it is now going to be transformed into a whole new realm of human existence. And, the currency of the past is going to be nothing like the currency of the future. That's kind of like where I've got to with that.
It does make me wonder, with advancements like cryptocurrencies and the amount of traction that they're getting in the market. I've heard someone say that even if governments went against cryptocurrencies right now, they would still survive, because they've gotten this critical mass now where clearly they have a value. They have so much investment from different groups all over the world, and we're seeing greater investment not only now from individuals but actual corporations and even governments in some cases. That yes, absolutely, it's there's a whole new model out there waiting for us and is slowly growing in the background.
Yeah, so the Fed's got its hands full.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Jeremy, I've got to say we've had a high-paced, I think, the best part of 50 minutes together or something like it, and it's been absolutely fascinating. Genuinely, I think I've just say to our viewers and our listeners. I think that Jeremy's book, Reality Check, is definitely worth a read. I found that you certainly are a fascinating character and a tonic to talk to. So may I say thank you for joining us on SilentEgo, the soul of the entrepreneur today, our very first. And long may your interest in this subject matter continue, because like I say, I think it's been an absolute tonic to have you on today, and I wish you the best for the future.
It has been the pleasure has been all mine, Paul, and I wish I could go on further. There is so much more to talk about on this fascinating technology.
Round 2 coming up, guys. Wait for it. We're going to have you on again, Jeremy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Take care.
You too.